I foresaw a day when the US currency would not be the dominant currency. I remember I was an early adopter of crypto because I was in Asia, and Asia is always a more speculative market. They don't trust their currencies or governments, so they're always looking for something different, whether it's gold, crypto. And so my thought was the way crypto was being used for exchange and things like that and for people to purchase things. If you could do that, it was only a matter of time.
Welcome to Flourish in the Foreign, the award-winning podcast that celebrates, elevates, and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living and thriving abroad, while exploring living abroad as a pathway to wellness. I'm your host, Christine Job, a Black American with Trinidadian roots, business strategist and writer from Atlanta, based in Valencia, Spain. Hey everyone, welcome to Flourish in the Foreign. I am Christine. Welcome to the show if you're new. Let me just pop this off real quick. Black History Month is not canceled, obviously. If it could ever be canceled by one person or administration, for you are never really participating in the celebration of Black history, and you need to really check yourself. For all of us who knows and celebrates Black history every day of the year, we can't stop, won't stop, okay? Because Black history is world history. It's for sure U.S. history. It's for sure American, including North and South American history. It is world history, okay? So take some time this month and all months to learn about Black people past Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., all right? I'm going to say it. If you're not well-versed in Black American history, get versed. If you're not well-versed in Black Caribbean history, Black Brazilian history, Black British history, just global Black history, you have a lot to learn. There are so many notable people, there's so many notable movements, moments, inventions, and everything like that, okay? That's what we're doing here. Now, I not only say that to y'all because y'all celebrate Black history every time you listen to this here podcast. Yeah, the podcast that celebrates, elevates, and affirms the voices and stories of Black women living abroad, okay? Telling their histories, capturing their stories for posterity. You are celebrating that by listening to this podcast. What I'm saying is not y'all, but, some of y'all know people who need to hear this message. Send them this podcast. Tell them what I just told you. Black history can't stop, won't stop. Okay? We're not even going to participate in that. I don't know what that means. All right. The next thing I want to say is thank you all so much for your love and support for season 6. I kicked off this season with a mini season on aging abroad because that's what I was really thinking about and interested in. I thought y'all would rock with me because y'all have taste. But I didn't know that y'all would really enjoy this mini season like you guys have. You've been telling me, you've been emailing me, messaging me. And I appreciate y'all. I really appreciate that it resonates and that this is something that is obviously struck a chord with y'all. I do appreciate y'all that do send me messages and emails. So I want to invite y'all, if y'all have a suggestion for the podcast, y'all want to let me know something, feel free to shoot me an email. hello@flourishintheforeign.com. Okay? All right. I think that's all the announcements I have. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Let's get into this week's episode. Season 6, Episode 5. So we're continuing Aging Abroad, a limited series that is probably going to be an ongoing series. Today's guest is Lisa R. Mitchell. Lisa is a past podcast guest First appearing on Flourish in the Foreign Season 1, Episode 22, and again in the Financial Wellness Compilation episode as well. Lisa is an innovative global executive and consultant with over 25 years of experience in sales, marketing, and business development in the US, Europe, and Asia. Lisa has held senior leadership roles in the banking, financial services, and global education industries within Fortune 500 global organizations. Lisa is the principal of Living a Global Lifestyle, a global brand and community for expats, digital nomads, and global travelers. Lisa is an educator, global speaker, and writer on international personal financial topics for people who lead a global lifestyle. I love chatting with Lisa. And I'm really appreciative of Lisa coming back to the show to share her reflections on aging abroad and her reflections on money and finances while you age abroad. So, without further ado, I will allow Lisa to tell y'all all about it.
My name is Lisa R. Mitchell. I'm in my 50s, somewhere between Raising Hell and Amazing Grace. And currently, I'm stateside in my hometown of Brooklyn, New York. I was an international banker, but I've primarily always worked in serving expats and people who want to live a global lifestyle. As a matter of fact, at Citibank, it was called personal banking for overseas employees. And at Wells Fargo, it was called international personal banking.
I asked Lisa if it was her time abroad that influenced how she thought about aging abroad, specifically in relation to finances.
I would say probably no until I had a life altering event, right? I got sick in China. And also, China was my longest assignment. The thing that we forget, you live abroad, oh, I'm only going to go for a year, I'm only going to go for 2 years. Next thing you know, 5 years, 6 years, right? 10 years, and the clock is ticking. And this is a very, very timely topic. So I thank you for having it and being always ahead of the curve with that. Because again, with post 2020 and expats and digital nomads and having more flexibility in the workplace, people are realizing that they could be out, for 3, 5, 6, 10 years, and then they go, what about retirement? What about aging? Right? So I'm in my 50s and I'm also taking care. I live with my elderly parents. So I think one of the things that it has taught me and the pandemic is, how do you want to age? What is that going to look like? And so I also spent this year, I was fortunate enough, 2024, to spend a lot of time overseas and really reconnect with a lot of friends. And it's the same thing, right? We're all aging. A lot of us are in the sandwich generation. It's just, a lot of people are either taking care of their elderly parents, or they're trying to figure out, or they're trying to think about or they've put in 20, 30 years and they're trying to think of what's going to happen next. Should I retire abroad? So, me, I'm always looking for the next country. So I'm thinking, oh, wow, I really like the Netherlands. Had never been there, even though I'd lived in Europe, had never been there. But I'm thinking, how can I get here? What am I going to do here? As you said, what is aging? How am I going to participate in the healthcare system if I can do that? What kind of work am I doing? Because I'm a kind of person, I like to work. I can't, in my family, we joke retirement is for suckers. I mean, you won't catch anybody in my family who hasn't worked 20, 25 years, 30 years somewhere. Like, you retire, you die, right? So that was all. I mean, my dad, over 50 years, my mom, over 40 years, right? So it's like, okay, what could aging look like? Let's say if I pick the Netherlands or any other country. You still need your sources of income. You still need healthcare, and you still need it. And it's so funny. One of my good friends, she's living over. She was in China as well, and so her partner. I was like, "Wow, I really like the Netherlands." They're taking us around. I said, "I don't know. I could see myself moving here." He's like, "Lisa, you don't know anybody here." I said, "Well, I know you guys, and I do know one or two other people." And it's just the mindset. I was like, "Well, that would never stop me, not knowing anybody." But he's right. What he was really saying is, how would you build community? And I think in terms of expat and being an expat, since I've not just done it for myself, but I've done it for business, I always say it depends on where you are in your life, right? What season of your life are. It's going to look very different, right? I didn't think about these things when I was a 21-year-old kid moving to London the first time, or when I moved to London the second time in my 40s, or when I was living in Vietnam. I don't even think I thought about these things actually, even when I was in China. You know, expat life, sometimes you're just thinking about how you're going to make it to the next day or to the next moment.
I asked Lisa to go over how to prepare financially to live a life well lived abroad, a sustainable life abroad, and to prepare for retirement abroad.
So for expats, or people who would like to be expats, there is good news in that the current administration has publicly said that they support residence-based taxation, which for those of you who are moving abroad, if you're a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident, you are taxed on worldwide income. Now, that doesn't mean you might owe. I mean, that's a whole other story, a whole other podcast. That just means you have to file, right? And most people have to file. I mean, there's some, but generally that's what it means. It's in your passport. It's global, taxation. Anyway, the new administration is saying that they want to change that. And they did say that in 2016. Is that going to happen? I mean, there have been a lot of expat groups that have been advocating for that. There's the way they want to change the government and change government efficiency, the process that some of these organizations have been using, the ways and means committees. I mean, I'm deep in I keep my ear to the ground on that because it's important. That may all change. It could be a slice of the pen. Hey, any U.S. citizens living overseas, you don't have to pay so maybe foreign earned income exclusion and all these other FBAR on all these things that people have been complaining about U.S. expats, it might go away. That would be huge. I can't even wrap my arms around it, and I'm trying to stay close to these advocacy groups that work on this, so I can be more and more informed. So I'll let people know. But the way we should prepare, well, it's always too. Also, you said preparing for retiring abroad. Why? So we see everybody, you and I were in this space, they're running to the gates. I got to get out of here. And I don't want to, but like I said, never is a long time. And you should never make any decisions really based on emotion. We've all just, like I said, systemic and systematic. We've been, we you shouldn't be really making any like hard decisions. Work your plan your work, research. What I've been trying to do since I haven't had the words to speak, I've been giving resources. There have been tons of articles on retirement visas, digital nomad visas. I encourage people, whatever countries they're interested in, to just go to the country's website, embassy, consulate, and look, for ways to immigrate to that country. The other thing I'll say, if there was ever a time to build a war chest, a financial war chest, it's now. I'm doing that for myself. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you do 5 remote jobs, keep your 9 to 5, get corporate contracts, leave no stone unturned. Now is the time. I came up with this that, follow it, although it's hard, follow what the wealth, this is for wealthy people, right? This is this new administration. Follow what they're doing, right? Read if you're going to read what are they doing? This is a time to build your war chest. Debt. People always ask me, "Oh, should I go abroad if I'm in debt?" I've been abroad in debt, but I would say this time, right now, the interest rate's a little bit lower. We don't know how long that would last. Really, really try to be debt free. And you've never heard me say that. I'm like, look, if you want to go abroad, and you owe, as long as you have the income to support it, right? Of course, to be able to pay your bills, which is my other thing. People, I still see this question. It drives me nuts. How much money should I take to move abroad? I don't know. No, I do know, but that's not the question you should be asking yourself. The question you should be asking yourself should be, what are my monthly financial obligations, even when I move abroad? So for that number, Christine, for you, that could be 3,000 a month. For me, that could be 5,000 a month. But that's the minimum amount that you need to make whether you're in Venezuela, no, not Venezuela is not a good example, Singapore, Brooklyn, or Mars. And people just, like my pet peeve, people just don't seem to really get that. I heard somebody say, oh, don't take less than $10,000. Well, what if your monthly expenses, and this is home country, you still have to pay, even though you pare it down, you try and sell everything, you still might have, I don't know, maybe $1,000. Okay. And then moving abroad, there's always unexpected things. You might have, I don't know, you'll have an extra, let's say that's 1,500. So it's 2,500, right? 2,500 with me, do the math, times four. That would be $10,000 right there, wouldn't it? So that would only last, that would means you have 4 months of savings in case anything goes wrong. I don't know, right? You and I have both heard these stories about people have to come home and da 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 da. Also, the other thing to remember, since we were talking about debt, I know for younger folks and stuff, it's student loan debt, right? And a lot of people will using the foreign earned income exclusion and they have zero. I think student loans is up for grabs. I mean, we're talking about abolishing the Department of Education. Like I said, hold on tight and be prepared for anything. I can't even touch that one. I'm just trying to educate myself about what that means and the lawsuits. It could get ugly. Also, right, the things financially to prepare. Okay, it always comes back to what are going to be your sources of income. Okay, Social Security. You know how I feel about that. Some younger people, well, it's not going to be here, they touch it. You need 10 years and 40 quarters. I say if you're paid in, never leave money on the table. So you should be concerned about that. In some countries, $1,000, I forgot what's the minimum, the minimum Social Security, US Social Security retirement benefit. I think it's less than that. But that might be enough for you to live on. There are lots of people living in places like Thailand and things like that on Social Security. So what are your sources of income? US Social Security, right? Especially for those of us who are paid in. Any of our retirement accounts, 401k, Roth, your pension, right? Those are sources of income. So let's just look at those because there's been a lot of chatter in groups. People are shocked. Again, you have to do your homework that countries tax this income. Some countries, not all, right? Some countries. I can never remember. Is it Spain? I think Spain does tax. France does not, which is why a lot of people move to France. People are shocked by this. I think I've said this before. One of the things the new administration says, I don't know how this one's going to go over. They're not going to tax Social Security benefits, right? Like some states in the U.S. do. I was appalled at the taxes that my parents pay on their U.S. Social Security retirement benefit living in New York. So those are three major ones. People have got to, if they're thinking about retiring overseas, or even, I actually hate that term fixed income, but that's a whole other story. People are assuming, oh, these just take those three are going to sustain me while I'm overseas. Well, not if the local government is going to tax you, right? And yes, it can be offset, can be, right? You pay taxes in the US, there's a foreign tax credit. But what if all those things go away, right? With this new administration. I would tell people look at the tax treaty between the country you want to move to and the US, and that determines, look at the totalization agreement. There have been all these fights about windfall elimination, which is, kind of double dipping. If you have Social Security benefits in more than one country, that could all go poof, who knows? But those are three main things. And then, hey, cash is always king, right? For retirement. And then what other types of sources of income, right? I'm telling everybody now, like I said, build your war chest. If you have it now, find some additional sources of income with remote. You can do micro tasks. There's so many things that you can do. Learn to earn with crypto and other. And then, the new administration, crypto, they're waiting for, like Gary Gensler to leave so they can just kind of go wild with no regulation. That's the other thing to remember with this new administration. Financial services is anticipating a new era of less regulation.
I asked Lisa to share with us some currency exchange and financial strategies that she has developed as she has lived abroad and been a banker abroad.
So, I mean, exchange rate, volatility is always something anyone having a life overseas has to think about. And it's hard for US citizens because the US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So most people don't. I meet people, I used to meet people, and I have to stop listening to these conversations. They're like, oh, I don't even know where to exchange money. I'm like, in a bank. Okay. But it's never been a big deal for them if they've never traveled before. When I was a banker, international banker, of course I dealt with this all the time. My group was part of the international group, and I was able, and this is important because this is pre-Wise, pre-Revolut. So I was able to give my customers competitive exchange rates over the branches. So that was a winning point for me. And I don't know if I know I've talked about this. I begged my poor compliance officer to let me add a multi-currency component like Wise and like Revolut. He said, no, it's too risky. And most Americans don't know anything about foreign exchange anyway. So then the rules changed with the financial crisis, right? And I always say it's no coincidence that Revolut and Wise, which I love them both, rose from the ashes of the financial crisis and are European companies, right? There've been a lot of US companies that have tried to replicate that. It's always challenging, or just, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but when companies like that come to the US, they have to find a US partner. That means a US bank who's really willing to help them with the compliance. It's very, very, very challenging. Many of us received a letter from some of these fintech companies this year about compliance and about US addresses and everything. And so that's what the banks mean when they say a lot of regulation. So maybe in those areas where we might have less, that might be better. That might help people like us who live a global lifestyle. But banks are always looking to de-risk. I foresaw a day when the US currency would not be the dominant currency. I saw that. I saw that. Remember, I was an early adopter of crypto because I was in Asia, and Asia is always a more speculative market. They don't trust their currencies or governments. So they're always looking for something different, whether it's gold, crypto. And so my thought was the way crypto was being used for exchange and things like that, and for people to purchase things, if you could do that, it was only a matter of time. Did I think we'd be talking about it this soon? No, no. Now, I always believe in a multi-currency approach, meaning I believe in always having currencies on hand. Someone like a Wise Revolut make it easy because you have the card. You don't have to have it physically on hand. But either one that you choose, I think it's a good idea. Now, where we had the whole digital nomad movement, you're making money in a strong currency and you're having a low cost of living, and that's right. We call that what? Geo arbitrage. But like I will say, I foresaw a day where the US dollar may not be the preeminent currency. And I've always been a proponent of multi currency. The United States, do they want a lot of their citizens? When your citizens start to run away from your currency, that's not a good thing. That's what you have in other countries, why people will hold gold and other stuff. Wealthy people, they do that, right? Wine, art. Like I said, follow wealthy people. If they, hey, they're selling gold bars in Costco. And
Now, I worry that some of you who are listening might get freaked out, frightened, disturbed by this conversation. But I don't want you to. The purpose of this conversation is to be real and to maybe open your eyes for some of you so that you can be really prepared for going abroad. Geopolitics is intrinsically entangled with finances. And if you did not know that before, now you do. There you go. So it's important that we are aware and we are prepared and we can understand, we can pick up on different signs and signals so that we can be prepared as we go to live a life well lived abroad. And so I hope that instead of feeling fearful, transmute that energy into education and being curious. Okay?
remember too that I live and kind of breathe this stuff. I've been doing this for like 35 years. Like I was 21-year-old kid when I first moved abroad. and then B school and got into banking before that. And then so I've been doing and also very specific. It would be hard to find someone who's done like expat banking for as long as, kind of I have and so it's not just and also kind of living it. And I also want to tell people, this is why fear can be such a dangerous emotion. What do they say? Danger is real, fear is not. This is the time to self-educate. And I've always been, right? I'm not an influencer, I'm more of an educator. This is the time to educate. One of the things I heard a couple of Congress people saying is, oh, the way people consume the news, you have the baby on the hip and you're trying to make the ends meet. And I understand that, but that's kind of also the way that they win. So you have to find pockets of time to educate yourself. Self-education, financial education. You don't want this stuff to be scary. And I've been in financial service a long time. I see a lot of people are frightened, right? To the point of inaction. They have such a fear. And people fear what they don't know. There's this prevailing thought that a lot of people abroad who don't feel sorry for us. And people are talking about, I want to go to this country and I want to go, and I keep reading it going, I hope you get the welcome that you think you're going to get. Because also, what I heard a lot is a lot of people complaining about their economies and their countries and how they're having trouble meeting ends meet. So I'm seeing people talking about flying and going live in these countries like the welcome wagon. And what I worry about, what I saw happening in 2016, if your own country treats you like trash and says this about you, why should any other country treat you any better?
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. And if you are, please consider supporting this labor of love, but labor nonetheless, by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast and please review the podcast on whatever platform you use to listen to the show. Fun fact, if you listen on Spotify, you can leave me comments that I can actually respond to. Yeah. Make sure you follow the podcast on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and all the other social media platforms that the podcast has. If you want to read more of my personal truths and musings as I explore and navigate the intersection of migration, Blackness, womanhood, and wellness, be sure to subscribe to my Substack, Flourish in the Foreign, Truths and Musings by Christine Job. And for all other Flourish in the Foreign resources about moving, living, and thriving abroad, including guides, courses, and more, be sure to go to flourishintheforeign.com. All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. Now, back to the episode. We, of course, had to talk about healthcare and insurance considerations, navigating healthcare and insurance abroad, because that is very important, regardless of how old you might be, but also clearly for cultivating a life well lived and, aging well abroad.
When I was just in Europe, it's like family and friends were like, they don't even think the NHS is going to be there in 10 years. And everybody trying to work for a company to get private insurance. I mean, just listening to them talk about the comparison, I'm like, why even, I don't know, have NHS or whatever. Thankfully, when I lived in the UK, I never got sick. I never had to use it. But just again, it's the ship. It's lower. It's cheaper. It's better. It's almost like, the expats we have. That's why I should do my next T-shirt on. It's, the cult. It's lower. It's cheaper. It's better. Right. And I always say, first of all, that's all relative, right? I got sick in China. It was mid five figures. Sure. In America, it might have been 100K. A person who had something similar to what I had, sadly, it was, more serious. It was six figures. That's still six figures she was saving for something. Okay, in the US, maybe where she had insurance, it would have been 300, but maybe she would have had insurance. So, I always say costs are relative. Yes, in other countries, they do try to take the money out of healthcare, right? In the United States, what did the pharmaceutical companies and stuff tell Biden? Like, "Oh, we have stockholders, right? You don't really have that." This whole idea about the universal healthcare, and I'm going to fly in and just be able to use it, especially if I'm in my 50s and I haven't contributed to it. People need to, you need to take a deep dive on that. And I'm doing that myself. Like, okay, if I show up and I'm working and I'm not working for a bank or whatever, how is the insurance? I think also too, as I have parents who have Medicare and stuff, I just think the whole insurance, all that in the United States is so complicated. Like I read it and my eyes cross over. I just want to go get a drink. Right. And then this whole thing again, and I'll say it here, and I've said it before, US expats, again, don't want to pay for a lot of things. Right. Again, it's the lower, cheaper, better. Not always. And cheaper is relative. And a lot of the examples you hear, sadly, I had something serious. It was a major organ. A lot of these examples here, people, oh, well, I broke my ankle in, Greece. Well, that's not comparable to needing dialysis or having a kidney problem in any country, because I've looked at a lot of these price lists. Um, so people need to think about their health care and how they're going to merge the two and what they're going to pay for and how they're going to be able to pay for it. It's not a open blanket policy with these universal health care and healthcare in other countries, especially if you're going at retirement age. How have you paid into it? And is that even right? That wouldn't be fair. Now, a lot of them, these retirement visas and things like that, I think they have provisions for that. And there's always private insurance in these countries, which is usually cheaper. But you really need to like get under the hood with that. And people, I still see people going to be an expat and they're like, well, I'm just going to buy, nomad insurance. And I just put in one group about buying an annual expat policies. And a lot of those are underwritten. It's not so you have to go through the process. I did. It was like brutal, after I got sick in China. I just decided to stay with what I had, but I really had to think about it. I really had to think about it. And thankfully I was okay, didn't have any residual problems, could visit my doctor twice, would I visit him quarterly, and it was cheap. But you really have to weigh it. I don't like people saying automatically it's cheaper. It's we gotta have you gone to Europe and spoken to people in these countries? Like you said, they'll give you a different story about how difficult. So you get sick in a developing country, and it's like I said, what you have, and then all of a sudden they're taking blood, and you're like, where'd you get those needles from? You don't even think about it when you're at home, and then you're like, where'd they get those needles from? What kind of machines do they have when I'm taking an x-ray? But you need to, like you say, what's the standard? Now, a lot of countries, for good or bad, follow the US standard. A lot of these countries you're going to cheaper development. What's the infrastructure? What's the healthcare infrastructure? I still think people want cheaper and they think they won't get sick.
I truly hope that you all are taking notes and researching. You can find some price lists for healthcare on hospital websites. And just do your due diligence is so important. As I've said before, and I'll say again, simply changing locations, moving to a different country doesn't mean that all that ails you will be healed or that the systems will just work better or in the way that you need them to work for you and your family. So please always do your research. I asked Lisa to discuss some of these remote work and digital nomad visas.
I get a lot of people who like, I don't want to be an influencer. What remote jobs? And you and I had talked about this before of people who have more to lose. Um, that's why I think like digital nomad visas are great. And I don't know what's going to happen to those, quite frankly, because they give you an opportunity to try it out, right? Nothing beats a failure but a try, right? And yet sometimes you have to start somewhere, right? So you always go into everything with the best of intention, right? I remember my mother telling me, I think that was my second move to London, which the global financial crisis happened. I was a banker. What did my immigration officer tell me? The lawyer said, you can stay here, but if you don't have an income, the whole banking empire, if you will, had crumbled. She's like, they're not going to renew your visa. That's just the reality. And people are like, oh, why'd you come back? Well, I'm like, I came back for financial reasons. No shame in that. These are people who, of course, have never really lived abroad. Why'd you come back? Well, yes, I could have gone to stay on a beach, as one of my headhunters said, for 6 months or whatever, but who knew what was going to happen? Kind of the same situation we're like in now. We don't know what's going to happen. But people do forget that having a passport and travel is a privilege. We do forget that. And, some of us, and I would say this too, well, Mexico already said it. If you deport and send these people back, I'm sending Americans back. The president of Mexico already said that. Supposedly. I mean, I read it a couple places. I wouldn't be surprised if some other countries, immigration is already tightening globally. That's already been happening. It's already been more challenging. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that happening. That's just kind of where we are. I always say just plan, research, and stay ready, right? Try to stay ready. And that can be a little bit more difficult. I still see people saying, "Oh, but you could be gone in 90 days. You can be gone before he's president," right? We saw what happened to the pandemic. A lot of people couldn't come back that wanted to come back. I don't know. These are unprecedented, right? Borders closing, mass deportation. Who's next? Once they finish this, what's that? Denaturalize, talking seriously about denaturalizing people. That's extremely, extremely serious. Tell me one person that's for some of us just 1 to 2 generations out. And people like I'm here, oh, it's not policy, it's not law. Yeah, you're gonna wait around for it to be policy, a law, you're a law. I mean, denaturalization naturalizing people. What global impact will that have? Like my brothers, where am I supposed to go? Back to, let's see, do I pick, and is that paternal or maternal? That's maternal. I guess I'll be in Kingston, Browns Hall. If that's paternal, I don't even know where I should be. Unprecedented. So oh, you can be out in 90 days. Take this seminar before he becomes president. No, you can start preparing in a seminar, a webinar, or what your options and choices, but I wouldn't tell anybody that. I wouldn't, I'm not a, I wouldn't tell anybody that. Especially someone who's never done, these are newbies. You and I could maybe do that.
I asked Lisa about end of life care and preparing financially for this long event in our lives or our parents' lives.
Well, I've, of course, thought about that once you have a life-changing illness. And then I have elderly parents, and I'm like, well, where would we go? My mom's like, well, how am I going to learn the language? Right. So those are all good things. And when I was in China, I would always ask my student, I taught adults, and having been sick, well, what if I was on life support and my family couldn't get here? Do you turn it? What do you do? Right. Those are the things you should be thinking about. You're right. What's the landscape, the medical landscape in this country? A lot of people I see now want to take their parents. I'd take mine if they wanted to go, but my dad's legally blind. I think people think you have to go into the village, care will be cheaper. That's probably true. Okay, who's paying for it? How are you paying for it? Medicare, savings, long-term care policy, insurance policy? How are you going to pay for care in this new country? And what's, again, the landscape? Do they have nursing homes? Do they have assisted living? Or is it cheap to have someone probably live full time and quality of care? Okay, I got somebody who lives full time to watch mom. Is she experienced with dementia patients? Is she going to have her sitting looking at a wall all day? What's her level of I'm experiencing that now. I'm looking for a caretaker, right? Do they work with people who are legally blind? Are they going to take them for a walk? What are they doing? Or are they just a babysitter? And that's the same for us. So again, I see these people, they go, they live abroad. I'm thinking about this too. I'm also getting things in order. I don't really want to be cremated, but how much is it going to cost to bring my body back? What's the process? And every country is different. Who's going to coordinate that? I'm currently not married. My family members are not married. I don't know if I can depend on one of my younger cousins, but I might. Or there are some companies that also do that for folks like us who, may be single. But even if you're not single, the nursing homes are full of people who have kids who can't take care of them. Maybe they're working, the sandwich generation, or they don't want to be bothered. They're waiting for you to kick off so they can get their money. This is right. I'm in the caregiving community, so I read the stories are endless about they're doing all the work and the other five siblings are doing nothing. I don't know what palliative care is like. I don't know if something happens to me in the Netherlands, I fall down and I'm unconscious and all my family's in the US. You have to investigate that, right? Aging. Community is important, but like, when I was doing research with this, we have to remember the expat community is very transient. It's very, very transient. So you may make a community of people. What happens? I see these groups, oh, we have a community of people, and people start to age, they start to die, and no one thinks about repatriation of remains, which you should have. No one thinks about evacuation, which you should have. All those are things you should have in your insurance policy. But I go back to how are you going to pay for it? Right? You have a long-term care policy, you have an insurance that covers you abroad. You have one that takes research and time and going through a list of names and having your questions together. And if you don't have any family in the US, you have to pay for it. I always tell my cousin, like we're single, if we don't have men who we can find or whoever, our parents are aged to death, you got to pay for it. I tell everything, you have to pay for it. So you have to be figuring out that now. I mean, I think of some of the countries I've lived in. Like I know, like in the UK, they have a similar thing with caregiving. So they have people who are, who caregive. Most of them are from other countries. Maybe the difference is kind of what Kamala wanted to do because she went through it with her mother. Medicare has provisions for paying it. So maybe the NHS has provisions. Other countries think of getting old and elderly, like you gave the Kenya example. I think it's like Germany, Switzerland. These places are like spas that people are able to go to. It's a natural progression of life. We're the only one that now, only country. Oh, wow. What are we doing with aged people? Like when I left China, one of the things that was big business was building nursing homes. It used to be your family took care of you. Now your family can't take care of you. That's also a natural progression of economics financially. They got to go where the jobs are. Maybe that's not a small village in China where you grew up. So they were building nursing homes. And, in these countries too, retirement aging starts at 50. And many of my students, you're 40, aren't you? Retiring, and also retire and do what? Right? They're starting to have a problem because their children didn't want to have children. So there's no grandchildren that they thought they would be raising and play. Birth rates around the world, globally, South Korea, are down. Right? So this is also a global problem. You're not having kids. Who's going to take care of all of us in all these countries? A robot? I don't know. So those are some of the, and you had asked a bunch of questions about having children. I don't have children, but about disabled children or children with special needs. There was a time in the expat community when corporations would be bringing people over. You need a visa. I have a friend who's an immigration. Countries find out your child has you're disqualified. You'll never get a visa because the countries don't have the capacity and infrastructure. And also culturally, we are a culture in the US. If you have dementia or you're in a wheelchair, you're out and about living your life. In the other countries, you're hidden. It's just, still a shame, a stigma. So you're off somewhere. What if something, and this is the other one, caregivers that are aging. What if something happens to that person? Her mother outlives her. She needs a plan for that as well.
I asked Lisa to share some final thoughts on financial planning and some strategies and some tips to get y'all in tip-top shape.
These cost of living, NOMBIO, Expatistan, they've been around for a long time. When I was doing expat banking for global corporations, they make tons of money putting this out. sometimes I used to read them and go, have you actually ever lived in these countries? Because I had visited them. And I also have a formula I give people: your home, your host country, and a slush fund, right? And then your savings should be based on that. Home expenses you'll still have, potential host country, and I have lists for that. Then you add a slush fund to that. Invariably, somebody's going to die while you're overseas. Your best friend got married for the third time. You can't go because your slush fund didn't cover that. Oh, I didn't know. So, and then you take that number and then you multiply it by, okay, if you want a year's worth to save it. These are big numbers. That's the other thing, generally. Now, I might get pushback from this, but I've done the count. I mean, unless it's okay, 500 in my home country, my host country is going to be 500. My slush fund is, I don't know, 1,500 times, I don't know, six. I don't know. There's so many things I think that can kind of go wrong. And we shouldn't only be thinking about, savings. Savings is not income, right? Savings is what it is savings. What's going to be my continual income? And that one is hard. I mean, it gets slightly easier if you're retired, if you have your pension and you have your social security, you kind of know what it is. So sometimes maybe that is a bit easier with the fix. This whole thing, the fire movement. I'm so glad somebody came out with ICE. I didn't come up with it first. I'll continue earning. Yeah, I was looking for an acronym. I was looking for one. I didn't come out with it. And then I saw this guy came out with ICE. And I posted it. So many people liked it. People that I know, like my friends, they were like, oh, yeah, no fire. Let's replace the fire with ICE. I'll continue earning. Thank you. It leads me to, again, what will you be doing? What will you be doing? I'm going to retire. And what will you be doing? Right? What are especially in a foreign country, you're going to retire. I just had this happen with a family member. I said, how's Auntie Lulu? Well, she's kind of sitting on her veranda because she's retired. There's a difference between I have to work and I choose to work. That's what I'm trying to get to, right? I don't have to work if I don't need to, but I choose to work. I choose to not retire and be productive. Yeah. There's a difference. I did want to talk about aging parents because that's near and dear to me, and we did mention that. And I just wanted to add, I did a test run this year, right? I was away quite a bit. So I want to say just some tips. Technology, two-way cameras were a big help. Setting up meal delivery, right? Even though I have a sibling, but he doesn't live with them. So the day to day, those are some things. And of course, funding. Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to pay for the mail delivery? Who pays for the two-way cameras? So that was important for me that, and what's the other one? The medical alerts, but that would fall under technology. That was important because I could look at my parents, my brother could look at my parents, my aunt could look at my parents on the camera and see if there was anything wrong. So I think you need to, because not every parent is going to want to move abroad with you or can. The one thing I didn't have a chance to do is I see all these people saying they want to take their parents, but they're not sure about the visa requirements for parents. I'd be shocked if a lot of these countries, they have aging populations if they want more aging people. So I would say that'd be something to be mindful of if you're thinking about taking your parent. I don't know about that one. I don't know and if they do, maybe it's a retirement visa, maybe it's a money thing. And how many of our parents are going to be willing to do that? Mostly, right? I have a friend from the Ukraine. His the grandparents didn't want to leave. Of course not. Maybe they don't want to leave. And that in itself is challenging. I find it, hey, me, I'm like, I could leave. But now I'm like, if things got really, really tough, your family's in the US and you're somewhere else, really have to think that through. Communication, how are you going to take care of them? What's that going to, I'm thinking worst case scenario, no regulation, no FDIC, all their savings, something happen. That's like disaster zone. But how can we prepare for that? Are we having financial conversations with our loved ones? Right? Like I'm thinking, I've got my whole family, my cousin thinking, my other cousins, like, should we build a compound somewhere? What are we thinking? What's your plan? Right? We should be talking, and not only family members, but friends. I'm lucky enough to have friends globally that are like, well, you can kind of come stay here until you figure it out, or we'll help you find out options. So I think those are the conversations we should be having sooner rather than later. And for those of us who are currently single, how's that going to work for us if we don't trust family? Some people don't. A lot of expats don't have family. Are you going to get a case manager? Or again, like you and I said, you're going to pay somebody to do it, right? And that's going to cost some money. Again, if you have children, special needs. I don't know. I was thinking, what are the rules and regulations in these countries for children with special needs, schooling, housing, medical? I don't see a lot of people talking. It's just like, well, I'm just going to take my kid. Okay, well, doesn't the government, whatever happened to governments when you needed a visa? And you needed a health check. That used to be huge. Now you don't need that. So, countries are going to be happy with us bringing in our aging population. Already these countries are bursting at the seams. So I worry about, the whole multi-generational aspect of it. And multi-generational, that's kind of new for us, right? We don't do multi-generation. Like, you retire whenever you want and I'm going to go live when I want. It's only post-pandemic like that I would even, oh my God, live with my parents. Are you kidding me? Right? We went off to college at 17, never lived. So that's a lot of change. There are a lot of things to think about. And the other thing I would say, you touched on this, Christine. People need to pay attention to the global politics. You and I live, breathe, and eat this. I know some more people need to do that because this is going to change everything on a global landscape, global perspective. So people, I know America first, but I can't remember who was on the other day saying, we are people don't want to admit it. We are, for the foreseeable future, we are a global superpower. We have responsibilities, good, bad, or indifferent. We have responsibilities. Let's say I am considering the Netherlands. I should be considering about maybe that's not the best country for the elderly. Maybe that's not the best country to age in, right? I don't know anything about assisted living. I don't even speak Dutch. So how am I going to be in assisted living or nursing home or what's that going to look like? But I don't know how they treat their elderly. They're aged. I don't know. So that's something I would need to find out about. Maybe it's not the best move.
Lisa and I got into this amazing conversation. We talked about geo arbitrage, global gentrification, which I think is really quite interesting, and how migration fits into all of it, which you can watch completely by subscribing to Substack. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing so much of your wisdom and your just sincerity and your care with all of us. If you want to keep up with Lisa, you can online.
You can go to my group, Living a Global Lifestyle, and you can join. You can email me at info@livingagloballifestyle.com. I like to see people who, will send me an email. I'm on Facebook, Lisa R. Mitchell. You can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa Renee Mitchell. And I want to help and I want to be a resource and continue to be that and let people pick my brain and talk to people and give them kind of my honest opinion. So I've been doing a lot of TikTok videos. We'll see what happens with the masterclass. So I'm going to go over that. That that's as good as the course you'll get. If you don't like reading books or whatever, the book is still, in play, but the masterclass is finished. Um, and I'm going to, really take everything I know, the resource guide, every resource we've talked about or that I'm going to give you, that'll be in that. It's like the Bible. I was thinking about it the other night. It's like the Bible. I hate to keep going to these groups and putting in the same resources. So those are some of the things. People can reach out to me at any time asking me a question, and it's nice when people do. So I'm happy to do it. I want us all to be successful.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flourish in the Foreign. To learn more information about this guest, be sure to check out their show notes page on the website flourishintheforeign.com. If you'd like me to come speak to your group, your organization, your sorority, your company, or any other type of entity, I can. Yes, did you know that? I can. I am available for paid speaking engagements, which includes in-person talks as well as remote talks. Yes, I do travel. I really do. If you're interested in booking me for an in-person or remote paid speaking engagement, you can find my media kit, my speaker page, and all booking information on the website flourishintheforeign.com, also on my personal website, christinejob.com, and in the description of this here episode. If you'd like to delve deep into my personal thoughts about life abroad, be sure to subscribe to my Substack, Flourish in the Foreign, Truths and Musings. If you enjoy this solo indie Black woman podcast, be sure to support this podcast by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/flourishforeign. You can also support the podcast by subscribing to the podcast, leaving a review of the podcast, and of course, sharing the podcast. For resources like the Move Abroad with Intention guide and course, be sure to check the links in the description of this episode and the website flourishintheforeign.com. To learn more about me, Christine Job, my work as a business strategist, and all my resources about business strategy, building a business, and more, check out the links in the description of this episode and go to christinejob.com. Big thanks to all of you, my lovely listeners who have kept this podcast going strong for 6 seasons. Thank you all so much. I love you and I appreciate you. And thanks to Zachary Higgs for producing the music for this here podcast. Remember, it is not about moving abroad. It's not about being abroad. It's about thriving abroad. It's about flourishing abroad. So go abroad and cultivate a life well lived. See you next time. Bye. In the next episode of Flourish in the Foreign.
Nighttime, it was total darkness. There was not even a light bulb. Can you imagine a whole city of people, not one light bulb on at night? These people were isolated like you could never imagine that kind of isolation. If you would go through to go to Hamburg or go to somewhere else by train, they would all be on the train station watching the train go because that's all they could do was watch. Okay? So Checkpoint Charlie was something that we always heard about in America, but it was the place that was forbidden. You don't go there.